disappeared in October 2007, and Snowy River was still dry in April 2008 when the bats woke up after their long winter sleep and Fort Stanton Cave was open for the season. Arriving at Turtle Junction, covered in mud, they changed into clean clothes and entered Snowy River to begin the trek south. The Fort Stanton Cave Study Project members were ready to continue the survey where they had left off in 2003. The cavers of the early 1970s could never have imagined what was at the end of their Priority 7 dig. Otherwise, they would have never abandoned it due to the unstable nature of some of the areas of the dig and the return of flowing water in the north end of the cave. Almost 30 years later, September 2000, the Fort Stanton Cave Study Project organized a group of their volunteer cavers to look at some of the old digging projects. Lloyd Schwartz was very impressed with the airflow and decided to dig in a different area of Priority 7. September 2001, after only 5 dig trips, Lloyd Schwartz, John McLean, Andrew Greco, and Don Becker opened up Starry Night's Passage, named after the starburst gypsum that decorated the walls. Surveying down Passage, it appeared that they had reached the end, but the roar of massive air lured them to a small duck-under air gap. After walking down a short passage, they came to an intersection. Much to their amazement, a borehole passage, the floor covered with a river of white calcite. Snowy River had been discovered. But before exploration could continue, the Bureau of Land Management, the administrator of Fort Stanton Cave, required a gate to be installed to protect the Snowy River formation and the preparation of an environmental assessment to define the approach to further exploration. Finally, in July 2003, the first expedition, heading south, they surveyed a half-mile of passage in Snowy River and discovered a muddy side passage and named it Mud Turtle after a rock formation at the entrance. The Labor Day expedition began on August 30th, 2003. 2 survey teams entered Snowy River. One team picked up the survey in Snowy River South and added almost another half-mile with no end in sight. The other team headed north and surveyed a little over 2/3 of a mile, finding a large side lead and discovering snowy rapids. The next day, September 1st, a single team surveyed about a 1/4 mile in Snowy River North when they encountered flowing water, which they named Crystal Creek. The environmental assessment stated that until water samples were taken, no one could enter the water for fear of biological contamination. So the team turned around and headed to the large lead to the east that was noted the day before. Surveying up a huge unconsolidated breakdown pile, they discovered a train-sized tunnel about halfway up. This they named the Metro. But it was late and it was time to leave, only surveying a couple of 100 feet of passage. October 2003, the Columbus Day expedition. 3 days were spent exploring the Metro, netting almost 1 1/4 3/4 miles of passage before finding Disappointment Dome that marked the end of the passage. There was also a trip to Snowy River South, adding another 1/4 mile and ending the survey where the passage had lowered to a 2-foot high, 20-foot wide crawlway. But the most significant trip was yet to come. October 14th, Mud Turtle Passage was surveyed, and when the map was plotted, it was found that Mud Turtle Passage ended in breakdown 40 feet down below Don Sawyer Memorial Hall. Discovered in 1971 by digging and blowing rubble at Roaring Hill Passage, the cavers could not find the source of the airflow. Now the mystery was solved. The air was coming from Mud Turtle and diffusing throughout the entire breakdown in North Don Sawyer Memorial Hall. When the October expedition ended, the Snowy River survey was slightly over 2 miles in length, and with the metro included, almost 3.5 miles of passage had been discovered. But in November 2003, the Bureau of Land Management decided to close Priority 7. There were too many unstable areas, and all the traffic had made them even more unstable. An alternate entrance to access Snowy River would need to be found. The best option was to dig a shaft between Don Sawyer Memorial Hall and Mud Turtle Passage. But before digging could commence, another gate would need to be fabricated. April 2005, the installation of the gate was complete. Digging began in October 2005 by members of the Fort Stanton Cave Study Project. At first, diggers could stand on the bottom of the shaft and hand buckets up to a line of cavers to be dumped. As the dig progressed, temporary wood bracing was installed and will be replaced with a more permanent solution in the future. The diggers hammered on rocks to break them into manageable pieces.
Buckets poured in.
Primed and digging with shovels and bare hands, they filled buckets.
Bucket up! A bucket!
Brimming with spoils, the buckets travel up rope, through a landing.
Clear!
Hauled up by an A-frame hoist. They make their way to a bucket tram to continue their journey to the spoils pile.
Bucket!
Located about 100 feet down the breakdown pile in Don Sawyer Memorial Hall. Finally, on July 30th, 2007, breakthrough! Members of the Fort Stanton Cave Study Project crawled from Don Sawyer Memorial Hall to Mud Turtle Passage. After digging over 40 feet and removing 36 cubic yards of material, they made their way to Snowy River through Mud Turtle Passage, a 1,028-foot mud-floored serpentine conduit, the gateway to Snowy River. Rounding the last bend, Snowy River lies before them, and much to their surprise, there was water in Snowy River. It was dry in 2001 when discovered, even though there was leftover water in Fort Stanton Cave's main corridor from the flooding episode of 1975 to 1993. So it was thought the formation was ancient and no longer active. In 2003, a sample of the top layer of the Snowy River Formation was dated 150 years plus or minus 60 years. This led us to believe that the water flow was maybe a once-in-a-century event. In April 2007, the main corridor began to flood, but the absence of a deposit seemed to indicate different sources of water that would act independent of each other. But there it was, water in Snowy River. Yep, they were surprised and excited, actually seeing Snowy River in action, but at the same time, disappointed, for the unfinished survey and exploration would have to wait. They didn't waste any time. It was an opportunity for science to be conducted on an actively forming Snowy River. Water samples for hydrological analysis were collected. Water depth to calculate flow rate was performed, and temperature measurements were taken. Dr. Penny Boston and Mike Spildy, distinguished scientists, traveled to Snowy River to obtain samples of the black manganese coating on the cave walls. This crust is believed to be deposited by microbiological action and precipitated as a byproduct of metabolism. July 7th, the water in Snowy River measured 14 3/4 inches. And on October 13th, the last day of the October expedition, there was 13 1/4. October 30th, 2007, one day before the cave was closed for the bat hibernation, a final water monitoring trip was scheduled. The monitoring crew was totally unprepared for what they found. Snowy River was dry. After falling a ½ inch per month from July to October, 13 1/4 inches of water disappeared in a little over 2 weeks. Everybody had assumed it would take at least 2 years to dry out. Everybody was encouraged. If the formation stayed dry, exploration could begin after the cave opened in the spring. So now, on April 26, 2008, project members walked 1.25 miles down Snowy River South to the beginning of the crawlway that marked the last 2003 survey point. The area pinched down so low that the team had to roll down passage. This went on for 400 feet. Eventually, the passage opened up, becoming mostly walking, with a few low spots requiring hands and knees crawling. Surveying on, they encountered Snowy River Spring, the point at which the formation goes under the east wall and was too tight to enter. But the main Snowy River passage continued, although muddy and without a calcite lining, to a room with a large breakdown pile. This is where the survey ended, with a total distance of 1,395 feet, almost a ½ mile of passage. A few days later, on April 29th, exploration continued at the beginning of the breakdown room. Surveying up Two-Way Hill, they discovered that the room was 200 feet long and up to 50 feet wide and about 45 feet high. They could see Snowy River formation along the bottom left wall through the rocks. The south end went into a slippery mud funnel. At its end, a triangular shaped hole that led to a hands and knees crawl. The mud lizard crawl is 140 feet long, about 15 feet below the level of Snowy River, with a floor composed of mud-cracked clay and a ceiling coated with a dripping wet manganese deposit. At its end, another breakdown room that led to the continuation of Snowy River. After spending hours investigating all the leads at Two-Way Hill and the return to Snowy River room, they called it a night with 547 feet of survey. Starting at the end of the return to Snowy River room, members of the May 1st expedition began to survey, encouraged that the formation continued past the breakdown rooms. The passage started out as a hands and knees crawl, interspaced with a few duck walks. There was a thin calcite crust on the surface of the mud banks that had cracked, flaked off, and washed downstream. In several places, dripping water had washed a delta of mud from the banks onto Snowy River, staining the calcite deposit for several feet downstream. After negotiating a few more obstacles, including some nasty belly crawling, Snowy River became a series of low pools floored with cemented calcite rafts and mud-covered ceiling pennants. Heading south, the passage continued to increase in size, gradually changing into a 15-foot-high canyon. With its two parallel lines running along the sides, it was named the Underground Railroad. Ending the survey at midnight with 1,515 feet, a little over a third of a mile, the team started the 7-hour trip to the surface. The 3 April expeditions added 2/3 of a mile to Snowy River south. June 28th, day 1 of the July expedition, the team started at the Underground Railroad. After a short distance, the Snowy River formation began to meander from side to side. To avoid time-consuming clothing changes, plastic strips, nicknamed magic carpets, were laid across the mud banks, a practice used elsewhere in Snowy River. In addition to the Snowy River formation, this area featured ripples in the mud lining the sides, mud vermiculations, and extensive starburst gypsum that had crystallized on the surface of the mud coating the cave wall, and mud stalagmites perched above Snowy River. Surveying the meandering passage, the dimensions stayed roughly 15 by 15 feet. But they ran out of time before they ran out of passage, ending while the corridor went on big as ever. Their total, 2,448 feet, a half mile of virgin cave. SRS 214, the last point for the previous team, but the beginning of a new day's survey for the July 1st crew. With light on station, the instruments were read and the coordinates recorded. Distance between survey points were measured with a laser disto. Then the profile and plan view of the passage were sketched. Littering the formation, calcite rafts had washed from the thin crust coating the banks of Snowy River. At SRS 218, a cross passage was found, the first major lead since Turtle Junction. But the main focus was on Snowy River, so they continued on, finding an area at SRS 225 decorated with stalactites, a rare occurrence in Snowy River. There was also some thin velvet flowstone along peripheral ledges and leopard-spotted columns flowing down from above. Snowy River became a low pool as it flowed around rocks at SRS 231. Rounding a bend at SRS 241, the ceiling jumped to 35 feet and another large opening appeared on a balcony above. To honor the early Fort Stanton Cave explorer, Robbie Babb, who passed away December 2007, this grand gallery was named Babb's Borehole. The exploration ended at SRS 244, where some large breakdown blocks had covered the passage floor. Calling the area Buenos Aires because of the good airflow, the team finished at 3 a.m. with 2,400 49 feet of survey, another half-mile added to Snowy River. The last trip of the July expedition was on the 4th. Crawling under the Buenos Aires breakdown, the passage continued, with Snowy River meandering from side to side until they reached SRS 262, where a large collapsed dome with a 50-foot ceiling nearly blocks Snowy River. At SRS 275, an even more significant breakdown area was found, with a low continuation of Snowy River at the bottom right of the passage. Reaching SRS 285, the team was amazed by a cascade flowing down from a 50-foot head wall. And because it was discovered on the 4th of July, it was called Liberty Falls. Just around a bend, another cascade was encountered, high on the right wall, with a large lead next to it. Ducking under another breakdown, they emerged at SRS 289 and surveyed their way to SRS 302, where they came to a large breakdown pile that had collapsed over Snowy River. It was 1:15 a.m., and with no clean route around, they named it Mount Airy for the noticeable airflow and began to head out of the cave with 2,975 feet surveyed, a little over a half mile. The 3 July expeditions added 1.5 miles to the map, and with the April expeditions, Snowy River stands at 4.1 miles, perhaps the longest continuous calcite formation known in a cave in the world, and with the metro added, there is a little over 5.5 miles of passage. A couple of weeks later, on July 27, 2008, Fort Stanton experienced a tremendous flood event when the remnants of Hurricane Dolly dumped around 3 to 4 inches of rain in the immediate area and up to 7 inches in the nearby Ruidoso area. A few days later, on July 31st, it was noted that Government Spring, the resurgence of Snowy River into the Rio Bonito, was flowing quite significantly. So on August 3rd, a team traveled to Snowy River to investigate. Snowy River was flowing again. Data loggers to electronically monitor water levels and temperature were immediately installed. During the October expedition, many other projects were tackled. There was digging on a lead in Helictite Hall. A radio location was performed at Wheeler Fisher and the Bone Dome, using a receiver on the surface to triangulate a precise position of a beacon in the cave. A trip was organized to check on some reported leads in Crystal Crawl, named for its gypsum needles, and Wheeler Hall, named for the Wheeler expedition who surveyed the cave in 1877. And on the surface, resistivity lines were run beyond Mount Airy, in which metal electrodes are sunk into the ground and hooked to a current-controlled transmitter. Soil conducts the electricity, and voids do not. A notebook computer automatically reads the potential and current, and after processing the data on a computer, a cross-section image of the underground anomalies is produced. These anomalies are potential cave passage. Also during the October expedition, hydrological measurements were taken by Dr. Lewis Land and Talon Newton using a multi-parameter probe which measures pH, conductivity, dissolved oxygen, oxidation reduction potential, and total dissolved solids. The temperature of the water was measured. Steve Pearman and Ron Lipinski obtain water samples for DNA analysis for microbiologist Diana Northrup of the University of New Mexico.
He said they're not so concerned about dirt, they're concerned about DNA. They don't want any of my DNA.
But couldn't they tell your DNA from a
Yeah, but it costs a
bacteria?
lot of money
Okay.
to do the DNA sampling, and they don't want anything on there that they have to sort through.
It's not like a video diary.
Do you have any choice in that? Shall I hold this for you?
If you want.
Okay.
You're going to hold this by the packaging, like I've got right here, and I've got to suck up some water.
Okay.
So, get down here, and I'm going to start sucking. And now I have to, screw this on here. Okay, it's tight. Let go of it. Let me have it. And I'm going to squirt it back in there. Perfect.
Just fruit. Just fruit.
Now I have to put this back in here.
All right.
Hold it. Let me unscrew it. Okay, count. I got to do this 15 times.
Oh, 15.
As the expedition drew to a close, the water flow had slowed down and the level had dropped from August. There's hope that Snowy River will dry out by spring so the survey and exploration can continue in 2009.